so much for joining me here today.
Thank you.
This is really exciting. And we're also very excited that you're able to join us too. I'm Emily Green, and today we're taking a smart CMO look at the business value of social media. And our guest, Dave Bushnell, has worked on social media campaigns for many of today's hottest musical artists, including Lady Gaga, whose record-breaking campaign I know many of you have heard about. So Dave, obviously amazing results. 5 million Twitter follows, 15 million Facebook fans, over 1 billion video views for Lady Gaga. But even the most impressive results has to begin somewhere. Can you tell us how it all began?
Sure. We began with Lady Gaga just like we began with any new artist. Our music group has been representing new artists for the past 4 years. We represent 15 artists at any particular time. So we were brought her by Interscope Records. And that campaign started just like any other, except we all realized, I think, when we saw what she was creating, both in terms of her music and her art, that the way it really boiled down in terms of marketing was very simple, which is just simply listen to this and look at this. And so in a lot of respects, compared to a lot of artists, a lot of our work was done for us.
Well, as you know, our audience here today is comprised of marketing professionals, marketing executives across the spectrum, from startup companies to global brands. And looking at a brand like Lady Gaga is very different than the perspective of most of our audience today. Can you draw any parallels?
Well, I think the first point I would make is that, and this may seem a little flip, but Lady Gaga is not a brand. She is an artist, and she certainly has the power of a brand, but nothing, I think, when you get down to the mechanics of actually implementing something like this is anything, there's very much in common at all with how a brand is managed. We manage both artists and brands at the agency. But the crossover there, I think, is that some of the things that Lady Gaga does instinctively to manage her social interactions online are definitely things that brands can learn from in terms of tactics.
And what exactly would those things be? I think as practitioners, we've all heard about communicating in an authentic voice or being more personal in how we talk to our audiences in the social media. But how can we take those things and actually apply them? You know,
when I talk to CMOs at conferences, I don't get the impression that there are any philosophical disagreements about how social media should be done. We all sit at conferences and say that we need to be authentic, we need to have genuine discussions with people online. But the reality is that we all go back to our hotel rooms at night and sit there and say, okay, how do I have an $800 million brand have an authentic relationship with anything? Some of these companies don't have authentic relationships with their own employees, much less some of their target markets. So I think the first lesson that I think we can pull out of what Lady Gaga does is to really trust one person to be able to speak for something that is as important as your brand. You have to find someone. You know, there's a question which is, how do you manage a social media campaign if it's not Lady Gaga? And I think my answer is, you have to find your Lady Gaga inside your organization. You have to find somebody who can speak in an authentic way for your brand, in a personal way. And for many of us who would want to find a way to do that, how do we get through the barriers of C-level expectations of what communication should be? Yeah. I think the idea that marketers tend to throw resources at something when they don't quite understand how they're going to go about something on a tactical basis is something in the current environment that more old-styled CMOs are getting punished for online. It's a very tough situation when you have a very close relationship with your prospects. They will take as much pleasure in punishing you for an inauthentic relationship as they will in rewarding you for an authentic relationship. So, when you really look tactically, let's look at Lady Gaga's Twitter feed, for example. We have 5.5 million followers. By any measure, huge. We will be #1 by the end of this month. when you look at that Twitter feed, it is surrounded by very conventional marketing efforts, things that CMOs are really accustomed to managing. It's us, it's Interscope, it's a number of people who are all constituencies surrounding that feed. But the feed itself is really what built those numbers. And the only person managing that feed is Lady Gaga. So when you talk about what resources does it take to have an effective Twitter campaign, it really takes one person who does their job in a very authentic and real way with the people they're talking to.
Could it be that part of the problem is that the traditional ways of measuring success don't quite match in the social media landscape? You might have 1 million Twitter followers, but does that mean that you're increasing your revenues or that you're generating leads? Or how do we measure value?
I think when you look at something like a Twitter feed, for example, or Facebook followers, or any of these new media, the idea, and this is my usual metaphor, is that building a social network is sort of like making a snowball. It's a two-step process. One is you scoop, but then you have to pack. Because if you don't pack that down, then when it comes time to throw it at something, it just all falls apart. And I think companies do pretty well at the scooping part, but what they really don't do very well at is the packing part. And they're doing, I think, a lot of that scooping in some fairly artificial ways. They're providing prizing and sweepstakes and all these sort of almost monetary incentives to sign up. And they're not really getting inside the head of their prospects. They're not really sitting down and thinking through who the people that they want to talk to are and what they want. Not in terms of do they want a trip to Acapulco, everybody wants that. But when they want to take part in something, what really gets them excited? So it's not people rewarded for joining your stream, it's people becoming compelled to actually join your Twitter stream. And that's where it takes some insight in terms of turning your Twitter feed into something genuinely interesting. And that's where it takes creativity. And that's why it takes individuals to not only take part in your Twitter feed, but also to manage that as well.
So we're talking about Twitter, but all of the marketing leaders are always trying to look at their overall social media mix. And it's almost as if there's a recipe that someone is supposed to follow for the perfect mix, when in fact there's a good deal of experimentation involved. And how do we justify the investment in experimentation when, as marketers, we're more accountable for the bottom line?
I think the first thing is really to look at the capabilities of each of these major media. For us, I really think YouTube and Twitter and Facebook are the real focuses right now. You can spend a decent amount of time on these sort of emerging media, like Foursquare, for instance. But when you look at the majors, it's managing them properly to really understand what their capabilities are. Twitter is a great call to action medium. It's immediate. People have expectations that things will be quick and fun.
Give me an example of something that's generated a great result.
I think the thing we focus on when we're doing creative for Twitter, it's funny, always the first ideas that come through are, well, let's give them something for signing up. Let's provide these incentives. But some of the real core ideas get into actually getting people to provide content to you. So for a particular client, we had a campaign where moms could actually take a particular day. So we had Scream Into the Pillow Friday for moms who were there alone.
Every day?
Yeah, exactly. And it was where moms would actually tweet the things that they wanted to say to their kids, but never would. And some of them were funny, and some of them were actually fairly serious. But it was in cooperation with a site where we could deal with all those things. But what we had were people creating genuine content that other people in the community could talk about. And so we ended up getting this sort of recursive cycle of people being handed a theme by us, more than a prize, really a theme and an idea. And then they would come in and they would contribute their own content. Then people would come back and react to that content and provide even more content. And so you end up with a community and not a feed. And so it's that kind of creativity that I think we really stress much more than any sort of the prizing, and you get a certain prize if you're the millionth Twitter follower.